Let's say you've got family coming over, maybe a hot date, or just generally somebody you're trying to impress, and you need to cook a delicious meal that's gonna blow them away. This can be a really intimidating task if you're not a great at-home cook. This right here is the meal you make when you want to convince your friends that you are a good at-home cook. I'm gonna show you how to make delicious, tender braised short ribs, creamy mashed potatoes, and sauteed broccolini to go with it. It's gonna look a lot more impressive than the work that you put into it. The process of making this is gonna be really straightforward. Most of this dish can be made beforehand so you can spend your time enjoying the evening. If you're too nervous to cook in front of other people, I'm here to help.
Most braises and stews start in a very similar place, and that is with aromatic vegetables. We'll use 2 parts yellow onion to 1 part carrot and 1 part celery to add a base of sweet and savory flavor to the dish. This is a classic mirepoix, and you'll see it used in many dishes that cook for a long time. There is a choice to be made here though, and I go back and forth on it. If you plan on eating the veggies at the end of the dish, leave them large like you see me do here. If you're gonna strain them out for a much smoother experience, feel free to cut them a lot smaller. Dice your celery into large pieces and do the same for the onion as well as the carrot. I'll crush 6 cloves of garlic here and peel the skin, but don't worry about dicing them. We need about 1 cup of red wine. A cabernet works really well for this. I want to give a quick plug for Waiter's corkscrews. These, in my opinion, are the easiest way to open a bottle of wine. Use the blade to peel off the foil, insert the screw into the cork, turn it 7 times, and then attach the topmost notch to the edge of the bottle. Pull it and then move to the second notch, pull the cork out, and that's it. I kind of just hate the butterfly ones, and I think these are so much simpler. And now for the short ribs. For a dish like this, and depending on how meaty your ribs are, 3 ribs a person should be plenty. Not every rib is going to be meaty. I had one in this batch that was actually mainly fat, so it helps to have a little extra. Today I'm making enough braised for 3 to 4 portions, so that's what I've got here. To prep them, simply season each piece generously with salt and pepper. Set your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and place a Dutch oven over medium-high heat on the stove. Once the pan is hot, add enough canola oil to cover the bottom and begin browning the short ribs in batches. These don't need to be cooked, we're just looking for color on the meat and dark bits of meat and seasoning to form on the bottom of the pan. Work through all the ribs and then drain off most of the fat from the pan. The beef is going to release a really good amount of fat throughout the entire cooking process, so we don't want too much right now. Add your vegetables and cook over medium heat until you see the onions slightly turn translucent. During this time, keep an eye on the dark bits in the pan and add a small amount of water if you see things starting to get close to burning. Add 2 tablespoons of flour to the veggies and allow to cook for about 2 minutes or so. Add a hefty tablespoon of tomato paste and cook that for another 2 minutes. You're going to judge this by looking at the color on the bottom of the pan. If it starts getting too dark, you know it's time to add the wine. Add half of the wine now and stir that in to scrape the brown bits off the bottom of the pan, and then add the other half and mix continuously until you see the wine thicken. The flour is going to swell up from the liquid, so be sure that this is smooth now. We don't want this to be lumpy in the end. Add a tablespoon of soy sauce and your 4 cups of water. Same with the wine, add this in batches and make sure there are no lumps. Add about 1.5 tablespoons of this bouillon stock, or if you don't have it, replace all the water with low sodium beef stock. Season this with a little garlic powder, onion powder, and pepper. I'd say go easy-ish on the garlic powder because too much can make the final dish taste a little musty. Bring this up to a simmer and add back your meat with any resting juices. Try to situate it so that some of the meat is poking out of the liquid, as that's what sets a braise apart from a stew. Don't forget to add a sprig of thyme and a sprig of rosemary like I did before this goes in the oven. This is going to go in partially covered for 2 hours. I would say take a nap, maybe watch a show, you've earned it. After those 2 hours are up, the first thing you'll notice is the insanely delicious smell in your home. Take the pot out of the oven and check the tenderness levels, and take a moment to bask in how delicious this already looks. Don't get too excited though, as this needs 1 more hour uncovered in the same 350 degree Fahrenheit oven. I will take a moment to mix the liquid around so the topping doesn't get too dark, and back in the oven it goes. During this last hour of cooking, we can get started on those sides. For roughly 3 to 4 servings of mashed potatoes, I like 3 large russets. Peel those and cut them into a large dice, and then place them in a pot of cold salted water. Get that over medium heat. We're going to bring this up to a simmer, not a rolling boil. A boil is going to break the potatoes apart, which is going to make them soak up too much water. I like to check the doneness of the potatoes at about 10 minutes or so, but they usually need at least 15 to be completely tender all the way through. Once cooked, drain your potatoes and place them back in the pan to stay warm and steam off any extra moisture. If you haven't cooked with broccolini before, it's pretty much a more tender and quicker cooking broccoli. Weirdly enough, I find that broccolini has a stronger flavor, but that doesn't seem to be the consensus online. Either way, it makes for a delicious and quick vegetable side. At this point, your short ribs should be tender and ready to go, so pull them out of the oven. Give them one last tenderness test with a fork, maybe taste them. They should be really close to falling apart, but not completely dissolved. Short ribs are a pretty fatty cut of meat, so there's going to be a good amount of fat that comes out of it as it cooks. I like to skim this because I don't want it to be too oily in the end. You can do this easily with a ladle and just remove some of the fat from the top of it. Be sure to save it because we're going to saute the broccolini in that beef fat. This can stay warm in the pot until we're ready to serve. My trick for truly luxurious potatoes is pushing the potatoes through a mesh strainer using a stiff spoon. It's more work than using a mixer or a masher, but the final dish is so smooth, creamy, and fluffy. Just keep pushing the potatoes through until the only things left are bits of skin and hard potatoes. Be sure to use a large enough container so you don't make a huge mess. Heat 100 grams of half and half along with 3 to 4 tablespoons of butter until melted and warm, and then pour that over the potatoes. Mix this together and season with salt and pepper, and that's how I get the consistency I like. These can stay warm in the oven until we're ready to serve. For the broccolini, heat a few tablespoons of the beef fat over medium heat and then add the broccolini to the pan. Season them with salt and pepper and then toss until well browned. Use a fork to tell if they are done. If they feel cooked enough, they most likely are. I like to get them well and deeply browned, but sometimes they need to cook more without getting darker. In that case, instead of adding water, I like to just put a lid on until they're tender but not mushy. Overall, they only need a few minutes. Remove them from the heat and we're ready to serve. On a plate, lay down a healthy dollop of mashed potatoes to hold the other ingredients. I like to create a little well in the potatoes for the broccolini to sit on. Add a few pieces of short rib on top of the broccolini and spoon on some of the gravy along with a few carrots and vegetables. Again, you could strain this, but the carrots and onions are so delicious, why would you get rid of them? Another extra step you can take would be to debone each piece and remove any large noticeable pieces of fat. This is a really classy move, but sometimes I just like to leave them as is. This is the easiest way to impress someone and show them that you care at the same time. The ribs are tender, unctuous, and perfectly seasoned. The cooking liquid reduces itself to a rich and flavorful gravy. There's a depth of flavor here that can only be developed by the long cooking process. The good news is that most of this is just unattended time. If you work from home, you could get this in the oven over lunch and have a stellar dinner ready for after work. If not, this is a great weekend dish that I can't recommend enough. If you do make this for someone else, be prepared to cook this every time they come around. I don't recommend making this on the first date because you're going to set the bar way too high. Thank you so much for watching. If you like the video, go ahead and subscribe. Let me know down below what you'd like to see me cook in the future. If you really like what I'm doing here, check me out on Patreon and consider supporting me like these amazing people do. Check out my website for full written versions of all of my recipes. Cheers!